Hey booktube, it's Becky from Becky Writes. This is Becky Reads, and this is my most recent, most disappointing reads. Now, I decided to make this video inspired by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes and the Top 5 Wednesday topic. And I am not doing exactly a Top 5 Wednesday because it's not Wednesday and there's only 4 books, but it got me thinking about books that have been disappointing. Some of the books that I hated the most last year, I hated because I had high expectations and those expectations were not met. I will leave my least favorite books of 2016 video down below in case you're curious, but a lot of those books were books on there because they were disappointing, not because they were just terrible, although sometimes terribleness and disappointingness went hand in hand. Now, on my list of books that I found disappointing, again, are some books that weren't bad, I just had really, really high expectations, and then some books that I thought just weren't well executed, and all of them are books that I was super looking forward to, and man, they disappointed me. The first and most recent one is The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ahdieh. This is the sequel to The Wrath and the Dawn. This is the second half of that duology, and this is a part of the 1001 Arabian Nights retelling. It takes place in pre-Islamic Arabia, and I was here for this. I was here for Shazi and Khalid and Tariq. I was here for the characters, and I was interested in them, and I thought that the first book brought this world vibrantly to life. I loved it. I was excited about this. I inhale read these 2 books back to back because I was so excited, and then I thought that this one fell flat. This one has a subplot that I don't think is very important to the main plot of the story, and she spends a lot of time on the subplot in this book and doesn't actually spend enough time on the rest of the story, and it irritated me beyond all measure. I think I gave this book like 3 stars, but really I think honestly it's more of a 2.5 star. The writing still has beauty to it, and there are parts of the story where you can feel everything. You can feel the sun on your skin and the heat and the sand and everything. But there are also so many parts of the story where things seem completely unfinished and it feels rushed and awkward, and it was just a huge disappointment. My next most disappointing read is one of the books I was looking forward to most for 2017, and I read it in January, and that is Wayfarer by Alexandra Bracken. Now, I did a spoiler-free review of this, which I will link down below, but I gave this 4 out of 5 stars in that review, and I don't think this is a bad book, although after thinking about it, I think that this is more of a 3.5 rather than a 4-star review. I just don't think that this is really 4-star quality. But part of what made me so frustrated with this book is that I loved the first one so much. Passenger, I thought, was great. I gave it 5 stars. I was anticipating this book. I had such high expectations for what was going to happen and how she was going to wrap up the duology. And then so much of this book, we are inside one character's head, hearing him angst and angst and angst over and over and over again, to the point that he is debilitated by his angstiness, which is not something that we saw at all in the first book, and I was super frustrated. This book starts out with a bang. It starts out with this huge dramatic scene, and it really sets the tone, and it should be action-packed and entertaining, and in many ways it was. This is a time travel series, and we're bebopping through time, and that is awesome. But the angst level that the main character Nicholas is feeling throughout this is just so extreme and ridiculous, and not in keeping with the character that we got to know in the first book, that I was really disappointed. In fact, my friend Mary and I both pre-ordered this, and we're going to read it together, and she couldn't even finish it because she was so frustrated. So this one was a big disappointment. All of these are books that are in a series. This was one of my most anticipated books for all of 2016. I could not wait for this book to come out. I've been a huge fan of this series since I was in high school, and that was Golden Hand by Garth Nix. Yes, this book was a disappointment to me. I think part of it is that my expectations were like out of this world for this book. This is the 5th installment, but the 4th book in the sort of current day series of the Old Kingdom, and it continues the story where Aberson leaves off, and I love Sabriel, Lyriel, and Aberson. That trilogy of books is some of my favorite YA writing, and it's some of my favorite fantasy writing. I think aside from Harry Potter, the Old Kingdom series is my favorite fantasy series. Hands down, bar none. I love it. And so I had really high expectations for this. And I did a spoiler-free review of this, which I will link down below, and I believe I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And again, this is a book that's really more of a 3.5 star. But I was generous because I love the series so much. But the more I reflected back on it, the more frustrated I was. The pacing in this is really off. It has this weird dual perspective in the first 2/3 of the book, and in the last third of the book it kind of shifts whose dual perspective we're looking at. It is a lot about relationship building, but the interweaving with the action just doesn't work well. I get what Garth Nix was trying to do. He was trying to expand the world, and I'm excited to see what else will come out of that. And I'm certainly still here for Garth Nix and the Old Kingdom. Like, I am Old Kingdom trash. I am going to continue to read these books even if the rest of them suck from here immemorial, which I hope they don't. Please, please, book gods, let them be good. But I just thought that Golden Hand was a disappointment compared to how hyped I had made it and how hyped we all had made it. This book was really hyped for me because I love this series so much, and it just didn't live up to that hype. It wasn't as good as the other books in the series, and after you've waited many years for a new book and it's not as good as the ones you've read before, it's just extra disappointing. And finally, my most disappointing book of sort of recent times is one that I think is going to be a little bit controversial, but you know what? This is BookTube, I'm here for honesty, and that is Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. I loved the first two books in the series. Daughter Smoke and Bone and Days of Blood and Starlight, like, I loved them. Both of those were 5-star reads for me. I loved the writing, and I loved Cairo, and I loved the whole relationship, and I was here for the mythology of the chimera and the angels, and who is other, and who are our villains, and how do we create enemies out of us and them by creating our us's and our thems, and the whole idea of a resurrectionist and wishes. You guys, I loved the whole world of this, and I wanted to love this. But it just irritated me, and I think I gave this 2 stars. I was so frustrated with this book. Part of the reason I was frustrated with this book is that it should have been 2 separate books. This tried to pull too many different threads together in a single novel, and it didn't do them in a satisfactory way, in my opinion. There is a subplot here about a African-American biologist, and it's a very important subplot. It's meaningful, and I think it was neglected because it was a strange addition to the story we'd been led up to. She was just sort of dumped in, and you didn't get why she was important until the end, and so it felt distracting the whole time, and we really didn't get to explore her experience because she was such a minor plot in the beginning. I was also frankly really frustrated that we have all of this sexual tension built up over the course of the first 2 books, and then at the end, when we're finally seeing the 2 characters who've been trying to get together for almost this whole book plus 2 books before that, they finally get to be together for like 5 minutes, and it's so ho-hum and blah. I threw this book across the room and was like, you have got to be joking. And it's not because Laini Taylor is afraid of writing sex scenes. She wrote some pretty explicit stuff in the first book, but it just felt like she built up and built up and built up and then didn't deliver, and that was so disappointing. I think that's the thing that makes most of these books disappointing. These are all sequels. Every single book I chose is a book along in a series where my expectations have been built up because I've seen how well other books in a series can be written, and then you get a book like this, which is scattered and messy and doesn't tie the pieces together and is really dissatisfying, and so you get really disappointed because it just doesn't deliver what the series has been telling you it's going to deliver. So what are your most recent disappointing reads? I'd be curious if you've read any books in the last 6 months or a year that really, really disappointed you. Why did it disappoint you? And was it because it was in a series and you know the author can do better? Because that is hugely what motivated me to pick these particular reads. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!